everyone. Good evening, our esteemed panelists. And without further ado, I would quickly like to jump onto the session. So we've got something very interesting. We are decoding the legal risks that are going to be there in 2023. What are going to be the key challenges? But before we go into 2023, we're almost 2 weeks away from completing 2022. So I want to start with this panel, and I think I can start with Payal. That what has been your biggest risk that you've seen come up in 2022?
I think from an automotive sector, I think 2022 has been one of the most milestone for us as we recently transformed into an online direct sales business. Like automotive all throughout has been managed and seen from a lens of dealerships, and it was one of the challenge which was given to the legal department that can we sell cars now directly, to our customers. So I think, but this had a double-edged sword because when you get into direct consumer business, it brings in a lot of legal risks directly to the company versus which was earlier managed by the dealerships. So we are still on that journey, but the good part is at least we made a very successful start this year, where in fact we have transformed our entire electric cars business into direct sales and selling cars directly. For our ICE cars and our petrol engines, we are still managing through dealerships. So that was, I think, one of the important milestones for us for this year.
Payal, just to ask you, since we've gone from the e-car mode and your different other fuel mechanism we're looking at in the automobile industry, do you see the law has caught up with it or no?
Unfortunately not. We still have a very archaic Motor Vehicles Act, which still has some regulations which do not really meet the direct sales business, as I mentioned to you. It still says the dealership needs to go and register themselves with the RTOs, whereas it has no perspective to an OEM, who wants to now sell directly. So because I think maybe when the legislation was drafted, nobody anticipated that the car business will go direct one day, But I think I do see a lot of changes there, where I think at least on the car homologation front, wherein you see a lot of these certifications being brought into the glasses, tires, wheel rims. The government is really being very strong around ensuring that we make very good, safe vehicles. And Volvo is known for safety, So I think we are still on that journey, but it will take some time.
So a lot to look forward to in 2023.
And beyond that.
And beyond that, absolutely. Now I'm going to move on to Sameet. Sameet, in your experience, what has been the biggest legal risk and challenge that you've faced in 2022 in your industry and also from an in-house perspective?
So I think in 2022, I being a company secretary also, in the organization, so I think, most legal risk which we faced was a lot of SEBI related regulations, wherein particularly if you're talking about the insider trading regulations, or you're talking about, for example, risk management committee and then ESG and BRSR related issues. Because, for example, in BRSR, there's a lot of greenwashing is happening nowadays, and recently SEC has actually made a task force to scrutinize the reports where the people are giving the misleading reports. So that's a very big risk. The other risk we faced was, SEBI was very stringent recently on the insider trading compliances, and they have come up with a new thing which is called digital database, wherein all the UPSI has to be entered. Even if you're sending UPSI to me and I'm sending to somebody else, it has to be entered with the timestamp, with all audit trail and all. And that's why it's number one, it's a legal risk. It's very big risk. Number two, there are chances of getting the information leaked. That is always there. But the point here is the implementation of that is biggest challenge in the organization, because telling everyone that this information is UPSI, this is not a UPSI, you have to enter this information, you can't pass on this information, and somebody unfortunately trades into the shares of the company, so this becomes a lot of risky issue. So I think 2022 was, I think from my perspective, it was basically a lot of risk in relation to SEBI related guidelines, for example, related party transaction, now facing a lot of challenges in terms of related party transactions. Subsidiaries are being included in that. So these are some of the things, I'll discuss in detail also.
Yes,
but
we're
these are
going
some
to
of
come
the
back
things,
to board management and what we've seen and what would be your advice in 2023, especially for big conglomerates like yours. I'll just take, I'll request Manish to sort of talk a little about the challenges that he's seen in 2022 legal. I know he comes from the real estate industry. We've seen RERA happening. We've seen a lot of noise about it. That seems to be settled now. But what really has been the key issues for you, Manish, in 2022?
See, this has been a watershed year. Not that it is cliche to say so, but what has happened is look at the manner in which real estate we have looked in the last 3 years. 1 year before 2022, that is 2020, 21, and now we are in 23. We thought that the office will not be there. A situation came, everybody worked from home. We saw a situation, all the shopping malls were closed. We saw a situation where PVR had some, I don't know, few thousand cinema halls, all together closed completely and absolutely. But now in 23, what do we see? Its valuation is touching the sky. Insofar as PVR is concerned, there is revenge buying in shopping malls. Things have become omni-channel. Hybrid has become the way of life. Real estate prices, depending upon whether you are a buyer or a seller. If you are a buyer, you would have noticed the prices from 30% to 60% they have increased in Gurgaon. If you want to buy an office, if you want to take a A-grade 2 lakh square feet, except with all the noise, the model is going to be hybrid. If you want 2 lakh square feet of space in the whole of Gurgaon, you will not find it. It is not available. So I think hybrid models are going to go e-cash, e-tization, integration of the omni-channel businesses. Everything has improved. There are some sectors which have not, certainly, but 90% of the economy has improved. We are wanting better houses, bigger houses. The demand for 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, and 4 bedrooms have increased. Offices, the requirement of clean air, fresh air, and various other facilities. We are immersive environments, and look at the conference, you have complete house full at 4 o'clock. So I think in 2 years, we have seen petrol prices or crude oil from 0 to 110. So this has been a very challenging, and the future is going to be, it has taken India to reach 3,500 years to reach this $3 trillion economy. And in the next 4 years, if not 5, we will be a $6 trillion of economy. So there is more money to be made. What has been made in the last 3,500 years. So times are going to be very exciting.
I agree. I think, Manish, you're absolutely right. The way we've lived in 2020 and how we've come back and seen the world rediscover itself in a new form in 2022 has been an eye-opener for all of us in our segments. And Vaibhav, I want to know from your client perspective, you've seen, you have clients across industries. What has been your key challenges? What sort of issues you've seen them come up regularly in 2022?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Vani. That's a great question. Look, actually, the number of learnings this last 1 year has given is so many that it becomes difficult to sort of call out just a select few. But even if I was to do the difficult task of identifying 2 sort of key themes that we've seen, one is that government, we always talk of technology being a huge disruptor. I think 2022 has been all about law being a huge disruptor. Some of the colleagues here, Sameet spoke of the regulatory changes. What is now happening is that there is a tendency on part of the government, on part of the regulators, even judiciary, that they look at a problem and then all rule making happens to try and solve that problem. And often you end up throwing the baby out of the bathwater. The changes that Sameet spoke of on related party transactions, on insider trading law. Now, as a regulator, they are looking at some bad apples, looking at bad cases, and then making the rules and the entire framework around it. I was part of the CII committee which went and tried negotiating with SEBI to make some concessions on those related party rules that Sameet spoke of. But SEBI wasn't willing to budge. And their point was that I need to protect that last one public shareholder whose interests have been, taken for a complete ride in this so-called related party transaction involving the promoters. And we actually had to tell SEBI that, look, if you're going to look at that one incident, there were 7 other pieces of legislation that could have been used to, go after that particular errant promoter. And there was enough in the legal system. But now if you're going to try and create all rules just to solve for that one bad apple, you will end up creating a very, very bad precedent. And that's exactly what's happened. SEBI did not, despite all industry representations, did not dilute any of the rules on related party transactions. Same thing on insider trading law. So what is happening now is, look at what's happened on digital lending. There were thousands of apps that had, suddenly flourished, which were getting involved into, loan making, and lending business, which many would say was almost amounting to money lending. And there were those who were indulging in extortionist practices. But look at what RBI had to do. 3 months' time, it sort of consults everybody and comes up with these digital lending rules, which many would argue would pretty much kill the whole industry. So what's therefore happening now is that the regulators and the government also are working under intense timelines. They need to react quickly. And so if they're seeing bad apples, they are using that as an example, coming up with rules rather quite quickly. So whether you look at what's happened with crypto, we began 2022, I remember being part of panel discussions about how crypto is the next big thing. We're ending the year where Reserve Bank of India has very clearly stated its stand that crypto is going to be banned in this country, and so is the government saying so. So, you're seeing that level of a disruption happening through legal instruments, which is why it's very important and this has been our learning, Vani, that as lawyers, as practitioners, we tend to focus a lot on what's happening in courts. But I think there needs to be very, very deep level of engagement, not just by policy think tanks, but even by lawyers and practitioners and in-house counsels with the government at the point in time when they're making the rules. Because often what we realize is that, the baby gets thrown out of the bathwater once the rules are there.
Yeah, absolutely agree with you. I think, Vaibhav, you've hit the nail on the head. This year, we've just seen too many disruption and a very reactive approach, be it in terms of digital payments, be it in terms of crypto, be it in terms of gaming, everything, especially SEBI, we've seen the power of one shareholder knock down a company. And, it's come by towards the end of the year, but we've seen it all, and really the government needs to step up. And I think that's been the key message, and also for all of us in this room, we've been on our toes in 2022. I don't think I've had a week wherein, some new surprise hasn't hit me. And I'm like, oh, I never knew about this is going to come my way. So now, when I look at 23, I know especially with 22 being such a challenging year, so disruptive, 23, I look at a lot of legislations coming in. Even in 22, there were a lot of talk about labor laws coming in. We've all made discussion, we've had panel discussion, analysis in-house with our lawyers. Nothing really has happened. Now we look for, and now with the data protection bill introduced, we are looking forward to that. So in 23, from your perspective, and I think I'm going to open it up to the panel, what is it that along with labor, with data protection, what is it that you're thinking from your industry, from your work area, is going to come your way? And I think, Sameet, maybe we can also talk about board, especially, board management is going to become a big issue. SEBI has come up very strongly with guidelines, explaining it to your board, explaining the position of independent directors is going to be a big challenge for all of us. And I'm sure we all in our own capacity face that day in and day out. Over to you, Payal.
I think from automotive industry particularly, I think data privacy, Vani, you touched upon. I think that is one area which I do see a lot of changes, and many things in data protection law really does not cater much to our industry. So it's going to be, with times, we'll see that how much we will be able to still comply. And as I mentioned about this whole direct-to-consumer business, we in automotive industry are not used to that. And now suddenly bringing all this changes in system, I think, while that's a big law, but I'm not sure whether it will cater to all industry needs. So let's see. I hope whenever I go back and talk to my higher-ups that, oh, we have a new data privacy law and this gets changed. So I think that's one area I do see it to be very much impactful to us as we get into direct consumer business. And also, since I think, especially in the luxury segment which I work for, we are now getting a lot into this whole software business. Like I was talking to one of my colleagues just outside this hall that, you know, after a while there will be a stage that automotive will just be a car and full of softwares. You know, so it will just be like a machine with softwares in it. So I think I do see with this whole law to be catered into in terms of telecom laws. I think who knew that when you have a car which has a SIM in it, there will be telecom law applicable to it. The SIM is being brought to somebody in Sweden and you are running the car in India. So you have to do one compliance under the telecom laws. So I think that's one area which is new to us, and I do see a lot of impact of the telecom laws also onto the automotive industry as we're getting into this whole journey of software cars going forward.
I think that's very interesting, Payal. I think for me, when I thought about automobile, I would think about labor unions. You've given us a whole lot more perspective that, you know, there's going to be a lot of challenge that's going to come and new exciting laws coming which is going to impact your industry. Sameet, from your industry and from your experience, you touched upon board management, insider trading. SEBI has been overactive this year, and it has been out there to protect that shareholder, protect the interest of the independent directors, and very vocally. And I think there's been a lot of challenge we've all experienced at our board level. So please share your thoughts about it, and how do you see that evolving in 23?
So I think you're right. Actually, there's a lot of challenges we are facing, particularly from regulator in terms of SEBI, company law, and all. But you know, somehow I feel it's not bad actually. You know, we are the compliance officer. After all, compliance officer's job is to take care of all these things. And if it is something which is in the interest of the organization or general public, it's not bad. You know, sometimes the only thing is you have to see the rationale of the things also. You know, when you put some law, when you come up with something. For example, if you're talking about related party transactions, it has become a very big challenge for all of us. Then they have to see, you know, if the organization, the idea, the intention is good. You know, we compliance officer, we're ready to welcome it, we are ready to comply it, we are complying it. But the point here is that you have to see the scenario. For example, if you really see that the subsidiary has to take an approval from the audit committee of the holding company for a related party transaction, how far it is feasible for an organization which has 100 subsidiaries in different countries. So that is one of the challenges, which unfortunately, you know, fortunately we don't have that kind of a challenge. In terms of insider trading, we really appreciate that, you know, because ultimately if someone is trading in the share on the basis of information, someone is losing the money. There's some innocent shareholders losing the money. So I think intention is not bad. The laws are really, really good. But the point here is that you have to see from the perspective of Indian promoters, you know, say 60–70% of the organization as promoter holding organization in India. So from that perspective, one has to really think, you know, how much is required and how much we can put it in a gradual manner actually. But we as a compliance officer, हम तो कहते हैं आते रहे यार, because we are ready to face the challenge as a compliance officer. Frankly, हम तो कहते हैं हमारी value बढ़ रही है यार organization में और क्या चाहिए.
Absolutely.
हम तो ये बोलते हैं कि you know अपने table पे chart लगा के रखते हैं ऐसे, which is kind of a ECG chart. So this is the compliances which are going up. This is my blood pressure which is going up. That's the only thing we are facing. But till the time we are in the compliance officer, I'm happy. But the other thing is like, you know, board management. You touch very relevant point, because now what we are facing is that, you know, various committees. For example, risk management committee is mandatory in certain organization. It says, look at the scope. It says you have to, you know, estimate the risk, or you have to mitigate the risk in terms of ESG risk, in terms of financial risk, in terms of this risk, that risk. So the point is, board का काम तो आसान हो रहा है, पर committees का काम बड़ा मुश्किल होता जा रहा है, you know. So audit committee, risk management committee, they are having a lot of responsibilities now because they need to report to the board. So I think ठीक है, but it's okay. We welcome the change, frankly.
Yeah, absolutely. We welcome the change, and I think as slowly but steadily we've bounced. The way we've bounced back in 22, especially 21, with its work from home mode and COVID, things have taken a little backseat. So I think now we're headed towards a full, full speed.
Right.
That it's been very active year for all of us. And Manish, what has been your experience that, what is it that you're looking forward in 2023? What do you see more of action really happening in terms of legal industry?
So I'm very happy with the manner in which the government is working, except for exceptions. That's fine, because ultimately when the zeal of the government is to protect the interest of the lost and least, and that is how that one shareholder takes the entire company or the process to the ransom, which should be looked into. The laws need to be liberal, their implementation needs to be strict. We have strict laws and liberal implementation. So that is where I think we need to. My friend would know, in London, it is necessary, the Carriage Act which is there in London, which requires that insofar as haystack should be there in the back of a car. They did not change that legislation. But no cab driver in London has gone to jail because of that, because they understand that now horses are no longer there. But that act still stands. So therefore, it is the manner in which you implement the laws is more important. I would like to see some more technology taking role insofar as real estate is concerned. I would love to see, insofar as stamp duty is concerned, getting merged into GST. That's a huge, big problem insofar as each of these states are concerned. And a lot of evasion, a lot of disputes, a lot of people, nobody wants to pay the stamp duty for what reason, I do not know. But if it was to be submerged into GST, probably it will make life simpler. The other thing is registration. Today, I can transfer $1 billion company overnight, sitting in the comfort of my home, but I cannot lease a property for a period exceeding 12 months without going to the registrar's office. So there is already, a few days ago, I saw that insofar as the government is concerned, they are looking at the manner in which mortgages, leases, and sale transactions will become possible by e-tizing it. And if, so I'll just give you a broad estimate, just to feel little happy. I can't buy the car which my friend sells, but if you look at it, the total value of the real estate in the world is, give or take, maybe take a margin of error of 30–40%. It is 400 trillion. The size of the bond market is around about 120 trillion. The size of the equity market is around about 100 trillion. The size of the gold is around about 13 trillion. The size of bitcoins and this entire industry is not even 3 trillion. So we need to get our priorities right. We are doing everything for bitcoins and all these transactions which are taking place. But the real estate market, these reforms are must. And I do think they have been discussing this for very long. And I hope somebody implements them. And once we do away with the stamp duty or e-stampation insofar as registration is concerned, transaction of real estate, leases, licenses, if it could be done electronically, it will improve and it will reduce the litigation by at least 50%.
True. Manish, I can't buy the houses that your company sells, and neither can I buy the cars that Payal's company sells. So I think,
I'm very humble of both of you, actually.
Well, coming to Vaibhav, Vaibhav, what is it that you really feel that the regulators need to look at in 2023? There's been certain, like you mentioned previously, some disjointed efforts. There's been a very reactive approach, but do you see the regulator, the industry coming forward and coming with more structure and reforms in 2023 apart from data protection and labor? And what is it that I know we've had a panel discussion on data protection previously, but is there something that you really look forward to and you think is going to benefit the industry?
I wish I could have given you a very positive answer to your question, but the reality is, to my mind, coming 2023 will see even more disruption and more disjointed efforts. Because I think what's happening, and I think my learned senior Manish ji made a very valid point. He said, Indian economy will now double in the next few years. And we will make more money as an economy than we've ever made in our entire 70 years of independence. And 3,500 years of history. Now, with that level of economic growth, Vani, what happens invariably is that there's just too much of disruption happening at different places. And so each sectoral regulator, each agency is just looking at their own jurisdiction and then coming up with rules and laws that sort of best respond to that situation. Sameet mentioned about, the whole issue of insider trading. One of the issues that SEBI was looking at was the fact that listed companies sometimes do not disclose all the material information about the company in good time. Now look at the extremity to which SEBI suggested in a consultation paper that they released recently. They said if any media journalist writes a story pertaining to that listed company, that listed company is mandated by law to now give a positive or a negative response and clarify whether the story is accurate or not. This is nowhere in the world as a standard. There are media leaks everywhere. But look at the extremity to which SEBI is now thinking, no, we got to make sure every listed company is clarifying its position on every issue immediately the moment there's a media article. Can you imagine the extremity to this?
The power of pen.
So therefore, it is important to sort of now accept this. The quickly we accept that disruption is going to be the game for times to come. And just like how technology is a big disruptor, regulators, government agencies and courts will continue changing rules, looking at all the bad apples. And so we need to be proactive, we need to react well. One trend that started, Vani, a couple of years back and which is now only strengthened, is that employees, at no matter how senior they are, they need to realize that they're working for the organization and not for a particular promoter, not for a particular board, not for a particular MD. And in the past, and I've been personally involved in some not so good but fairly controversial cases, including Fortis Healthcare or for that matter, ICRA and some of the other credit rating agencies, that ultimately employee conduct will be judged on the basis of what they did, is whether it was in the best interest of the company. The defense, the argument that my MD told me to do something, my CEO told me to do something will not cut at all. And over the last 2-3 years, even as a law firm, Vani, we've had so much of work in the space of internal investigation, where whistleblower, where complaints about certain stakeholders within the company trying to sort of, push a narrative in a particular direction to suit their interest, that is happening a lot. And with now Enforcement Directorate becoming even more powerful with the recent Supreme Court judgment on what could be interpreted as proceeds of crime, we're typically seeing any economic offense these days, any company involving an economic offense, you see SEBI getting involved, you see SFIO getting involved, which has more powers than most other investigative agencies, including CBI. And then you have the Enforcement Directorate. And this is happening, this has happened over the last 2 years, that trend is only going to strengthen. So corporates need to recognize internal governance is very, very critical. It need not just be for listed companies where you're looking at interest of public shareholders. Look at some of the not so famous or the infamous tech unicorns, and in the financial sector, and one of the founders is always in the news for some cases being filed against him. All of that is happening because there the allegation is that the founder was not looking after the interest of the other investors. So stakeholder management will be a very critical role. We are already seeing instances where lawyers, there are separate lawyers for the independent directors, there are separate lawyers for the listed company, and there are separate lawyers for the management. So different stakeholders will pull in different directions. So this kind of circus is going to continue. The sooner we accept and sooner we try and sort of start responding quickly to that change, the better it would be.
I think, Vaibhav, you've actually summed it up very well that, in the last 1 year, the trend that I have seen the most is stakeholder management. And I think there's a lot of responsibility that lies on the shoulders of people in this room, and especially the people on this panel, to make the senior people aware that it's not the individual, it's the company. We are all over here working towards protecting the interest of the company. And I think on that note, I would like to